in the aftermath of the airstrike in Syria, the commander of Iran's Revolutionary Guard threatens a major attack on Israel. As a senior Israeli security source tells Reuters that the Iranian general killed was not an intended target. Further steps towards a coup in Yemen. Houthi Shia rebel fighters enter the presidential palace less than 24 hours after a ceasefire was agreed upon. And counter-terror raids continue across Europe. Germany launches raids on over a dozen suspected Islamist sites, while 4 men appear in French court over possible links to the Paris attacks. Good evening. This is the news today. Rhetoric and threats are mounting 2 days after the purported Israeli strike in Quneitra that killed 6 Hezbollah fighters and a reported 6 Iranian members of the Revolutionary Guard, including a high-ranking Iranian general. General Mohammed Ali al-Adadi is known to have been on a consulting visit to Syria and, according to new reports, was aiding in the construction of a missile base along the Israeli border. In response to the strike, the commander of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps said today that Israel should expect, quote, devastating thunderbolts in retaliation, as a senior Israeli security source told Reuters that the Iranian general killed was not an intended target. Inside Israel, the Security Cabinet is convening today to evaluate the situation after deploying an Iron Dome anti-missile defense battery in the north. And we will go to our correspondents near one of those missile batteries in the city of Haifa, Eli Hockenberg, Leah Berdugo, and Amjad Abu Arafeh. But before we continue, here's a look back.
Israel seeks peace with all its neighbors. But we know in our region that peace and security are intertwined.
طلب أي أهداف في سوريا هو استهداف لكل محور المقاومة.
ما هر حرکتی رو، هر تجاوزی رو به شدت محکوم می‌کنیم و این اقدام رژیم صهیونیستی هم به شدت محکومه.
And if we cannot defend our security against those who would threaten us and seek to attack us, and do attack us, then there will be no peace.
And joining me tonight in studio is Iranian political analyst Mayor Javed Anfar. Thank you for being here,
Thank you,
Mayor. And Colonel in the Reserves, Erez Weiner, former aide to the Israeli Defense Forces Chief of Staff. Thank you both for being here. So 2 days after this strike, which Iran said Israel carried out, Iran is saying that Israelis can expect a large-scale attack in response. Do you think this is the case?
Yes, I think it is the case, but the chief of the Revolutionary Guard stated that the Muslim resistance forces will continue to fight Israel till its elimination. So I think through that he meant that the Iranian response will come through a proxy.
Perhaps Hamas?
No, Hamas can't really be counted on. They tried to have a rapprochement recently, it didn't work out. They didn't get back together. So Hamas is not going to Turkey, but through Hezbollah most probably, and I think this is the avenue of the next probable reaction from Iran.
Mm-hmm. And how is the Israeli military preparing for a possible outbreak of violence in the north?
I agree with my colleague, and I don't think that we will see immediately breaking in the north. Hezbollah will try to retaliate in some other areas if it's still possible. And just to remember us that when they claimed that we killed Imad Monier, the father of Jihad Monier, who was killed in that event 2 days ago, they say that they will retaliate. They tried, I think that if I'm not mistaken, about 20 times. most of those attempts were stopped either in a direct support from Israeli intelligence or other partners of us around the world. The only attack that they managed to come through was the one in Bulgaria, the bomb in the bus, and even then the fingerprints led back to Hezbollah, and they didn't came out so good from it. So I don't think we'll see something directly in the north, but army as an army cannot stay and just trust his estimation. So that's why you see all those batteries, you see soldiers, you see artillery and tanks getting prepared. You never can be too much prepared.
And we're just hearing now that the IDF has blocked a road near the Lebanese border. Could this be just a precaution, or perhaps they have learned some information of a possible, there's talks about tunnels possibly as well?
I think that it's more precaution. I think that I don't think that we'll see something directly up in the northern border. If it won't be in the Lebanese border, it will be in the Syrian borders, and maybe even Hezbollah will use one of their proxies. There is enough Islamic jihad groups whatsoever in so many different names that could take an action and use their name for it. So that's is another option. But again, we should be prepared for everything and hope that we will be alert early enough in order to prevent it.
So you're saying it's not necessarily just the northern border that Israel should have its eye on. But before we continue, I-24 News reporter Eli Hockenberg takes a look at the latest developments in the north.
As debates over the nature of the strike in the Syrian Golan Heights are still underway, along with threats of retaliation, Israel is not wasting time to prepare the northern front. The IDF has raised its alert level in the north along the borders with Syria and Lebanon, while enforcing military forces there. That also includes the deployment of the anti-missile defense system, the Iron Dome. After a long day of security discussions Monday, the Israeli Security Cabinet is convening Tuesday for further evaluation.
We can be challenged anytime, anywhere, whether in the south, at the center of Israel, or up north. We're of course prepared and following each and every development. We are ready to act or react according to any need.
A vivid example of this high alertness occurred Tuesday morning as the on-call forces in the northern Israeli city of Metula spotted civil vehicles with Hezbollah flags right along the border with Israel on the Lebanese side. Several gunshots were heard, but it eventually understood to be part of a funeral procession. In the meantime, Iranian and Syrian officials condemned the airstrike attributed to Israel, while thousands of Hezbollah members called on leader Hassan Nasrallah to retaliate. Iran's foreign minister chimed in as well.
We strongly condemn any such move and attack, and so this act by the Zionist regime is also condemned. But with its historic background in our region, we wouldn't expect otherwise from the Zionist regime.
The commander of Iran's Revolutionary Guards, Muhammad Ali Jafari, was even less restrained, saying Israel should expect, quote, devastating thunderbolts in response to the attack, adding it's, quote, a new beginning point for the imminent collapse of the Zionist regime. As for now, the general assumption within Israeli security establishment is that Hezbollah is not looking to start another war against Israel. The Islamist group has its hand full with the war in Syria, as well as the rise of radical Sunni groups in its territories. But it is expected that Hezbollah will retaliate for the death of its fighters, and that could mean a retaliatory attack carried out abroad, for which Hezbollah is unlikely to take responsibility.
Now, Amir, this Iranian general who was killed, what do we know about him? And we heard that he was there in order to consult with Bashar al-Assad's forces about how to deal with the rebel forces. But other reports now are saying that he was helping construct a military battery along Israel's border. What can we conclude from all this?
Well, he's a veteran of the Iran-Iraq war. And he took part in some of the major operations against Iraq. He was actually, according to one of the news websites in Iran affiliated with Revolutionary Guard. He was also took part in some operations inside Iraq, in Iraqi Kurdistan during the war. And it was after that he was noted by the chief of the Quds force, Mr. Soleimani, who actually comes from the same province as him. They're both from Kerman. that he was invited to go to join the Quds force. Now, as to what he was doing in Syria, all kinds of different reports. To be quite honest with you, I don't think any Israeli government, be it from left or right, should put up with the fact that somebody as senior as him being on our border. And my position. I'm a left-wing Israeli and I support Meretz, but there is a red line. Iranian Revolutionary Guardsmen, a general on something like 2 or 3 kilometers away from Israel's border. This is red lights for anybody. I mean, if there was an Israeli general 2 or 3 kilometers from Iran's border, the Iranians would be losing their minds. So, whatever happened, if Israel meant it or if they didn't, that's for other people to decide what they said, if Israel, whatever. But the fact that this man was on Israel's border, there has to be some kind of an answer as to, why is Iran doing this? I mean, even if it was just touring that area, if he wasn't even building something there, this is a major cause for concern for any government when somebody from a force that has carried out numerous attacks against Israeli citizens. We see the deaths in Argentina, we see the deaths in Bulgaria, as you rightly said, in other places. When it's general of the IRGC, Revolution Guard, turns up near your border, this is a big no-no.
And this also reveals just how many players are in Syria right now. I mean, it seems like it's pretty much free reign, isn't it?
Syria is, you can say, a big chaos for the time being. But basically there are two major fronts. The first front is including the Syrian army, those who still with Bashar al-Assad. And with them, there is the Hezbollah soldiers who are standing today in the front of the war, in every major war front in Syria. You see the Hezbollah fighters losing already about 1,000 of their best soldiers. And with them, you see the Revolutionary Guard. Not so many soldiers in the field as commanders, generals, and colonels who advise, who give weapon and other kind of support, including money, so to keep the Syrian regime alive. On the other front, you see what we call the rebels. They divide between themselves. You see, in one hand, we have ISIS, who basically fight all the others, including the Bashar al-Assad troops. There's all version of Al-Qaeda forces, fundamentalistic Islamic groups with different name, but basically they're all in the same game. Mm-hmm. And you have the opposition, which is more secular and less fundamentalistic is Islam, and they're all fighting each other. How it's going to end, nobody really knows. For the time being, because all sides are rather tired, and because of the winter, in the recent, in the last weeks, we saw some, you can call it freeze in the Syrian arena.
Mm-hmm. In this very weird world that we live in, the Middle East, which priorities and alliances change almost daily. In a way, having Hezbollah on our border would be sometimes you could say, I would prefer perhaps you've been in the army. Who would you prefer on our border, ISIS or Hezbollah? Maybe Hezbollah. But the question is, they could play it wise, Hezbollah.
Like the snake or the spider.
I think probably you guys would prefer Hezbollah compared to ISIS. The problem, and I actually wrote an article in Persian for BBC Persian and published it. It's time for Iran to choose its enemy. Who is its enemy? Is it Israel or Saudi Arabia? Because it can't fight both. And this is the situation actually. If Iran would have used that border not to attack Israel, but just to keep it, I think Israeli decision makers would be much more comfortable with Hezbollah being there as long as they're not attacking Israel than ISIS.
And considering the state of Hezbollah, we heard in the report they're getting very tired as well with their fight in Syria. So is that preferable then from a defense perspective to have a group like Hezbollah on the border? And how will Israel approach it if they start to retaliate?
I don't think that we really actually want Hezbollah in our border. We don't want ISIS.
But between the two bads, who would you choose?
The problem is not like we think. We're not really the one who are standing the rules. It's not like what we will choose. And it won't be not ISIS and not Hezbollah. ISIS, you don't see ISIS for the time being. in the border between Israel and Syria. We do have all kind of other Islamic fundamentalistic groups, Jabhat al-Nusra and others, who are also not so friendly. And you have Hezbollah a little bit upper to the north in the Mount Hermon area and northern, because that's already the border between Lebanon and Syria. And there are some Druze villages who are basically much more friendly in our eyes. And there are the rebels, the oppositions in the center part of the of Golan Heights in the Syrian side, that basically would like them to have the control on the border. The United Nations forces who used to sit there ran, and they are today standing only in the Israeli side. You all remember probably that some of them were captured and being hostages for a while till the rebels decided to let them go after they getting some ransom for them. So this mess is no good from Israel's side. Hezbollah is suffering casualties and is losing blood and losing credibility in Syria, but it doesn't have any. It doesn't have much choice, because Hezbollah is dependent on Iran as financing and his weapon supply. So basically, he will continue to fight because he put too much on the table. He cannot leave the game for the time being. So all sides will fight till it will end. How it's going to end, I don't think that there will be one intelligence man or others that could stand up today and say, I know how it's going to end. Mm-hmm. It's changing daily and weekly. And
addressing the ego of Hezbollah, now some analysts here in the Middle East are saying that they will not respond due to they are really worn out due to the war in Syria. But they also might want to respond in order to not appear weak. So how can we expect this group to respond?
Hezbollah has made a mistake, to go back to my original point. Hezbollah made a mistake to pick a fight alongside with Israel at the same time as ISIS and others. I know we don't choose what happens in Syria, but I would generally say that, given our history with fundamentalist Shiites, Hezbollah being the most fundamentalist Shiite group there is, compared to the most fundamentalist Sunni groups, I think we pick the fundamentalist Shiites any day, being Hezbollah. Because there is an address, there is a structure, there is a political party. But they have made a mistake. They keep antagonizing Israel. And I think Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah made a big mistake in his speech on the 15th of January, when he basically set a red line for Israel, that if you attack Syria, you're attacking us, you're attacking the Iranians. Oh, we have so many missiles that the Fatah 110, they're old. This is old stuff. We have even better ones. And if the reports are true that they were building missile bases on our border, then, it's miscalculations all the way. And what's going to happen from now, as you quite rightly said, it's very difficult to predict. But I think it's important that Hezbollah also realize that whatever retaliation they're going to have, needs to be measured. Because if it's a strong retaliation, then somebody else here is going to have to retaliate for the retaliation. And before it's going to be escalation before we know it.
And do you think Assad...
I think that Hezbollah told us what he's going to do. He said, I'm going to retaliate, but I'm not going to do it over the edge of escalation. They want to retaliate for their pride, because they say so. They don't want to get to another front with Israel. So that's why I think, again, as I said before, that we will see something different. It could be an attack in the Israeli embassy somewhere. It could be an attack on Jews in one of the countries in Europe when they have very strong cells of Hezbollah and their supporters, and they use the Iran diplomatic post in order to pass weapons and explosives and so. So I think that it will be more logic to think that we will see a reaction in those fronts. And the second best is some retaliation on the Golan Heights, that they could, like Israel said, not declare that they did it themselves.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So that's what I think that we will see in the coming days or weeks.
Well, we will get back to this discussion here in studio, but Eli Hockenberg is in Haifa in northern Israel, where an Iron Dome missile defense battery has been installed. Good evening, Eli. Now, we've obviously been talking in studio about the installation of the latest batteries around the north. What's the feeling there? Are you getting the feeling that the IDF is preparing for a possible tense attack?
Well, Meredith, each and every time the northern borders of Israel are getting tense, and unfortunately it is known its fair share of such times, Haifa becomes the center of attention. It's the northern capital, only about 40 kilometers away from the Lebanese border. It has many refineries and other important crucial infrastructure facilities, so it becomes a very clear strategic target for missiles attacks. And indeed, in 2006, the Second Lebanon War, Haifa was a major target for rocket attacks. But the thing about Haifa is, Meredith, that it has a very unique DNA. The population here is completely mixed. We're talking about Arab, Muslim Arabs, Christian Arabs, Jews, Baha'is, Druze, etc., etc., and all of them are living together peacefully. Haifa really is a symbol of coexistence, and to see what's going on in such a city during times of war, it's especially difficult because on the one hand the city becomes torn, but on the other hand much more united, because you know at the end of the day a rocket from Lebanon does not differ between a Jewish home or an Arab home, and the people are standing together in a shelter trying to save their lives. So it's safe to assume that as it was in 2006, where the long distance Hezbollah rockets hit Haifa, and we know that Hezbollah had significantly improved its ballistic powers, abilities, Haifa will become not only a strategic target, but a much easier one if will be next time.
Yes, well, we will certainly hope that won't be the case. But Eli Hockenberg, thank you very much for joining us from Haifa. And now, as Ali said, many Israelis fear this. Hezbollah has mentioned that they have really beefed up their arsenal. So what are their real capabilities, and how will it differ from Operation Protective Edge if a war breaks out?
It's nothing alike. It's I don't want to put it in numbers, but I will say that what we saw in Protective Edge was the Hamas ability to fire almost all over Israel, but fewer rockets to the long-range places. And those rockets who already got in there, they have a very small warheads. So even when they hit something and the Iron Dome does not stop it, the damage and the impact is much smaller. Hezbollah has an ability to cover Israel from the borders in Lebanon to basically, if they want, Eilat, cover it all. Their rockets are bigger, more accurate, more modern. As I agree with Nasrallah that the Fatah 1 and 10 was basically an Iranian weapon that was smuggled to Lebanon, later on is built, and today it's built in Lebanon by Hezbollah. They have newer, they have a more accurate and much more bigger warheads. So it's a different story. And it is not that by firing the rocket they could destroy Israel. It's not so. But the damage they can do, even if you use all our... Yeah, it's much bigger than the one we saw in the Protective Edge, and even bigger than the one we saw in the Second Lebanon War in 2006.
And to gauge how people really feel in this country, we asked Israelis if they think the country is prepared for potential conflict with Hezbollah.
Israel is not ready to fight Hezbollah after the war in Gaza. If they enter Lebanon, it will be for a very short operation.
I think Israel is prepared for anything will come from Hezbollah or whoever will try to do something. They always say they will do so. Come.
We have the military abilities for it. We've been through this before, like in the recent operation in Gaza. The people of Israel are ready to withstand attacks in the north, and that's what matters. If we stand behind the army, they will succeed.
Look, it's our enemy, the Hezbollah, and we're dealing with the enemy all the time. We don't know exactly what will happen in few days, in few hours.
Okay, so this is how members of the public feel. It certainly is a daunting thought of another war, especially after Operation Protective Edge on both sides, certainly. But Mayor, today Russia and Iran signed a military cooperation deal covering exercises and even a possible renewal of a 2010 deal. And with S-300 missiles, ground-to-air missiles would be transferred to Iran from Russia. So what does this mean, and what does this mean for the Middle East?
I'm not sure about the S-300s. We have to be very cautious.
Very vague.
The Iranians have come to, right now, Iran is actually suing Russia in the International Court in Hague because Iran paid the down payment for the S-300. Russia scrapped it. And also, I don't know if the Russians are going to sell S-300 to Iran, they're probably going to have to give it from their own arsenal because they don't make S-300s anymore. Much like the Fatah 110 missile, it's old, if we believe Mr. Nasrallah. They have other systems, and I think the in tendency we have to, there's good reasons. The Russians have gone even as far as stopping the supply of spare parts for Iran's Russian-made MiGs. I mean, things got that bad. In Iran, there's a lot of mistrust. But because the conservatives want to get close to the Russians and the moderates don't. But anyway, it shows that we should expect a rapprochement between them, at least in Syria.
Indeed. Well, from Israel's security situation and the looming conflict with Hezbollah in the north to another front Israel is currently facing, a legal one at the ICC. I-24 News defense correspondent Alon Ben-David sat down for an exclusive interview with Israeli Minister of Defense Moshe Alon. Here's an excerpt of the conversation.
The ICC announced the beginning of examination of Israel conduct in the territories. Is this, you think, the first step toward placing a jurisdiction of the ICC on the West Bank and Gaza?
It's another hypocritic step against the state of Israel. Palestinian Authority, which used to perpetrate and execute homicide bombing attacks, and now associate with Hamas, which is used to launch rockets against our civilians, using their own civilians as human shield, and we are to be blamed. We are to be brought to the ICC. We are not going to sacrifice our soldiers or officers in front of the ICC in any way. We are not going to cooperate with it. So we'll find a way to defend ourselves by ourselves, as we are used to do during all the year.
And you can see the whole exclusive interview tonight at 7:40 GMT, only here on I-24 News. And we will be saying goodbye now to Erez Wiener and Mayor Javid Anfar. Thank you both very much for being here, having certainly an interesting discussion about everything that's unfolded in this alleged Israeli airstrike on Syria. Thank you very much, both of you, for being here tonight. And we are going on a short break. We'll be back in a few moments. In the aftermath of the airstrike in Syria, the commander of Iran's Revolutionary Guards threatens a major attack on Israel as a senior Israeli security source tells Reuters that the Iranian general killed was not an intended target. Further steps toward the coup in Yemen. Houthi Shia rebel fighters enter the presidential palace less than 24 hours after a ceasefire was agreed upon. And counter-terror raids continue across Europe. Germany launches raids on over a dozen suspected Islamist sites, while 4 men appear in a French court over possible links to the Paris attacks. Welcome back to the news today. In Yemen, Houthi fighters entered the presidential palace after a brief clash with the compound security guards a day after some of the worst battles in the capital in years and an attempted truce. Here's more on I-24 News correspondent Charles Peoples-Air.
Houthi fighters seized control of the presidential palace in Sana'a Tuesday, 24 hours after fierce clashes in the Yemeni capital left 9 dead and dozens wounded.
We and all Yemeni people felt afraid during the clashes, so this is worrying.
Despite a ceasefire reached last night, today's events mark an escalation of recent tensions sparked by the kidnapping of the president's chief of staff over the weekend. Shiite rebels forcibly swept into Sana'a last year, thereafter assuming for themselves key government positions.
It's the consequence of a political conflict unknown to the people. Everyone has to exercise self-control and return to negotiations.
But the country's sectarian fault line continues to widen, raising fears that Yemen could become the site of another proxy battle, in particular between Shiite Iran and Sunni Saudi Arabia. Ongoing instability, coupled with an acute al-Qaeda threat in the country, has also raised the real prospect of Yemen becoming an altogether failed state.
And with me now in studio is Eran Singer, Middle East editor for Israeli Public Radio. Thank you very much for being with us. Now, what are the goals of the Houthi rebels if they do take control of the country?
Well, they serve the interests of Iran. They are pro-Iranian. These are Shiite militias that are supported by the Iranian regime. We have been dealing through the last 2-3 years with Syria, with Iraq, and with other places when we saw the collapse of the national Arab state, and eventually it created a vacuum, and the Iranian regime is now is trying to get into this vacuum in Syria, as we can see in Iraq, as we are now witnessing, and there's another place, Yemen. But Yemen was not so discussed lately because everybody was discussing or was talking about ISIS. But this is a major problem today. You can say, especially after what we have seen in the last hours in Yemen, that Sana'a, the capital of Yemen, is now controlled by Iran. This is a whole new development which can jeopardize the relations which are already beaten between the Iranians, between the Shiites of Iran and the Sunni world.
And this is also a proxy to Saudi Arabia as well.
This is a major problem. The Saudis in the last months, they have understood, they have seen what's going on in Yemen, and they have decided not to support the Yemeni government anymore because they saw that this government is trying to reach an agreement with the Houthi or the pro-Iranian rebels, and the Saudis or in other countries, Sunni countries, said to the Yemeni government, as long as you talk to these people and you don't fight them, we will not assist you financially. So this is why Yemen, which used to be the poorest country in the world, is now even poorer, because the Arab Sunni states are not helping it as long as you see the pro-Iranian rebels working inside and doing whatever they do in order to control the country.
Well, now it seems like every hour at this point is pretty critical in the fight.
Well, when you have the pro-Iranian rebels now controlling the palace of the president, you can now surely say that Yemen is another site controlled by Iran.
Well, Eran Singer, thank you very much for these updates on Yemen.
Thank you.
And staying in the region, Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe concluded his tour in the Middle East today, addressing the threats made by the IS on 2 Japanese hostages. His statements followed a reported setback for the terrorist group in the Syrian town of Kobani, where the battle with Kurdish soldiers is still raging on. Ayman Siksek has more.
You're not from Japan, where are you from? Japan.
It's another dramatic appearance for IS executioners in a new video released by the terrorist group threatening the lives of 2 Japanese nationals.
The life of this Japanese citizen will cost you another 100 million.
In what has become an all-too-familiar scene, the IS demanded $200 million from the Japanese government in exchange for the hostages. In a visit in Jerusalem on Tuesday, Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe made it clear the country would not concede to the demand for ransom.
It is an unacceptable act to threaten us in exchange for human lives, and I feel angry about it. I strongly urge them to immediately release the hostages without harming them.
Just one day before, European Union Foreign Policy Chief Federica Mogherini also called for involving the Arab world in fighting terrorism.
I've always said it has to be underlined that it is not an issue between Europe or the West and Islam. Terrorism and terrorist attacks are targeting most of all Muslims in the world. So we need an alliance, we need a dialogue there to face the issue together.
Meanwhile, in Syria, Kurdish Peshmerga soldiers said IS militants are in control of 3 of Kobani's 13 neighborhoods after months of fighting in the Syrian border town.
Kobani is divided into 30 neighborhoods. We are now in control of 10 of them. The IS is only controlling 3. Their supply lines from Raqqa are broken because of the airstrikes and because we are controlling parts of the road.
But in the exchange of moves between world powers and the new representative of global terrorism, the IS, the question now is who will make the next move.
Otherwise, this knife will become your nightmare.
Meanwhile, 4 men are appearing before a judge today in Paris on charges that they provided logistical assistance to one of the terrorist suspects in the Paris attack on a kosher supermarket 2 weeks ago. Meanwhile, anti-terror raids continue in France and across Europe, with 5 Russian Chechens arrested today in the south of France, suspected of plotting another terror attack in the country. Maxime Paris and Ori Shapira have the latest.
The image of the day: Bill de Blasio, mayor of New York, paid his respects in front of the kosher grocery store near Paris, a moment of emotion as he saluted the heads of the Jewish community.
Seeing where people lost their lives because of who they were and what they thought, because they happened to be Jewish, because they were devoted to their faith, or because they happened to believe in the freedom of speech, is a reminder that these values are always under threat.
Strong words as counter-terror raids intensify in France and across Europe. 5 people were arrested on Monday night in Béziers and in the Montpellier area in the south. The suspects are Chechen Russians, one of whom had a cache of explosives in his possession. At least one of the members of the network was put under surveillance by the Internal Intelligence Services. Meanwhile, at the Élysée Palace, President François Hollande is touting the counter-terrorism measures his government is planning to implement.
Le Premier ministre y travaille et les présentera demain.
The Prime Minister is working on it and will present it tomorrow to control the jihadists' whereabouts, to reinforce our intelligence system, to prevent the proliferation of radical Islam in our prisons, and to restrain this movement's activities online.
These preventive measures may add up to more severe sanctions against perpetrators of terrorist acts and their accomplices. On Tuesday, the 4 men who were arrested during the investigation of the Paris attack on the kosher supermarket were brought before a court and indicted. They are now in detention, pending trial.
And now to economy. And with me is financial analyst Lionel Friedfeld. Thanks for being here, Lionel. We understand that Google is investing in a new venture.
Yeah, it's a $1 billion investment into SpaceX, which actually was funded by Elon Musk, which is a serial entrepreneur in the US that created Tesla Motors. This time, the company SpaceX is going to compete against Arianespace and launching satellite and do exploration in the space for different ventures.
So it sounds like they really have a boost now with Google's money for.
It is, but Google is investing into this company not to explore, doing exploration in Mars, but just to secure a way of launching new satellite, because they want to build up a satellite constellation that will provide internet, broadband internet to the entire world. And it's not the first time that Google is doing that. A couple of months ago, they did an agreement with the French space agency CNES, which is actually sending balloon in the atmosphere and having the signal for internet to be provided to people. With this Google investment, the valuation of SpaceX is $10 billion.
Wow, that is quite a lot. So from outer space back to Earth, bad news for global growth, we understand.
Exactly, because the IMF has a revised forecast for the growth for 2015 and 16, 3.5% for 2015, and it will be 3.7% for 2016, basically because there is a weak international investment, but also because of the volatility and of financial market and the instability of the economy.
So not a very good forecast. Can we expect this to improve in years to come?
We'll see. The U.S. economy is still doing good. Europe is average, and Asia is slowing down. So hopefully the new forecast in a couple of months coming from the IMF will be better.
Okay. Well, Lionel Friedfeld, thank you very much for these updates. And a report by the organization Physicians for Human Rights Israel on the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip during last summer's Operation Protective Edge was released Tuesday, with concerns being raised regarding the IDF's conduct towards civilians. I-24 News correspondent Shai Ben-Ari has more.
A report released by Physicians for Human Rights Israel is raising serious questions over the treatment of civilians by the IDF during the 50-day conflict between Israel and Hamas in July and August of 2014. The report was written by 8 international medical experts who received permission from Israeli authorities to enter Gaza, both during and after the operation. Its conclusions are based on testimonies taken from 68 Palestinians injured during Operation Protective Edge, as well as interviews with 9 Palestinian doctors and examinations of photo evidence and medical files. Among the issues raised is the sheer amount of injuries and casualties caused to civilians who were in the vicinity of their own houses. 49% of the injured interviewed said they were in or near their homes when struck.
لقيت الوضع يعني قدامي كل العيلة مرمية على الأرض والحدث اللي صار يعني الشهداء 13 شهيد مع حوالي 19 إصابات كان في عنا. كنا موجودين في البيت يعني كان لنا 5 أسر مع الوالد والوالدة.
Another concern emphasized in the report was a lack of safe evacuation routes for civilians caught in the crossfire.
فشاردين عشان الأطفال الصغار وهيك والنسوان وخافوا قلنا نطلع من البيت وإحنا ماشيين في الطريق نزعنا لهن صاروخين استطلاع اتصابوا 3 اتصابنا كنا طبعا وفي استشهدوا و3 انحرقوا و3 صار معهم بتر.
Also noted was the frequency in which medical teams who arrived to help wounded found themselves under fire.
ودخلت أنا أجيب للمصاب هذا. تم استهدافي بطائرة الاستطلاع وأكلت يعني شظايا كثير يعني من ضمن الشظايا شظايا في رجلي هان وشظية هان وأكلت شظيتين في صدري يعني تم خرق الصدر عندي من الشقتين. عدل من الشقة هذه وطلعت من الشقة الثانية.
The report was prepared with the help of Palestinian human rights organizations, and a representative of Physicians for Human Rights Israel admitted only minimal contact was made with Israeli representatives, specifically 3 Israeli doctors, 2 of them serving in the military. The organization has called for the Israeli government to establish a national commission of inquiry, which will examine the concerns raised in the report, and also calls Israeli policy into question.
And we have yet to receive a reaction from the IDF or the Israeli government to this report. And with me is Dr. Galit Artom, board member of Physicians for Human Rights. Thank you very much for being with us this evening. Now, looking at this report, there was a clear choice not to contact Israeli government representatives for input when crafting the report. Why is that?
We were interested in finding out what happened over there. We thought that if we would go there as Israelis, we won't have the information or we wouldn't know enough about that. So we sent people who are neutral in a way from other places just to see what is going on over there. We wanted the Israeli people, especially, and the world in order to know what is happening there, who was wounded, what was the mechanism of wounding. And we found horrible things like people who were wounded in a second tap. There was the initial strike, and then gathered people, relatives or other medical teams to help the people, and there was strike again. Many of the testimonies we got showed us that people were not warned to leave or to evacuate to a safe place. And as our reporters say, there's no safe place in Gaza. So people, even if they were evacuated from a building, where would they go? There weren't any shelters or other places. So they were attacked again and again, and they couldn't hide. We wanted people to know that this was their life over there, the life of the people in Gaza.
And according to the testimonies of Palestinians, many were treated in Israeli hospitals. Now, do you think this is a common thing in wartime?
I can't say what's common or not common. I can say that more than 2,000 people were killed, and I know that half of them were women and children. So there were citizens who were killed in a wartime. This wasn't a war between 2 countries, between 2 militaries. It was a war between military and citizens who weren't protected. And I see that as a problem that we, as Israeli people, should know that is a responsibility of us. So there's this Gaza. It's a place that it's under our responsibility. We can't attack them, then treat them, and attack them and treat them. We call for a solution that would be found before the next war. Of course, we were attacked. We attacked them. Who started? This is a question not to be asked. But it would happen again. Next summer or summer behind that. So we're calling for a committee, for the government to call for a commission to find out another solution so this wouldn't happen again. We want the people to see so many injured people in a massive attack, although they were known as need to be evacuated for suffering or for injury. They were not. We need to find a solution that is more possible for us to live here, for everyone.
Mm-hmm. And quickly, can you just tell us, did you look into the issue of investigating Hamas at all in this scenario?
No, we don't find ourselves as someone who's neutral enough to see who is the one to attack first and who did what. We wanted to see what happened for the people who were injured by Israeli army attacks. Specifically wanted to see what happened to the medical facilities. Mm-hmm. More than 17 hospitals and 56 medical clinics were attacked. And although we know that the army knew they had the coordinations of the places that were medical places, they were attacked as well. We see that as a problem that need to be investigated.
I see. Well, Dr. Artom, thank you very much for being here this evening to discuss this report. And in other world news, the Ukrainian and Russian foreign ministers are set to meet in Berlin tomorrow as the offensive in eastern Ukraine continues. Ukrainian military spokesman Andrei Lysenko said today the separatist rebels are trying to launch a new offensive in the Donetsk region. I-24 News reporter Uri Shapira has the story.
Fighting continued in eastern Ukraine Tuesday as top officials in Kiev continue to point blame towards Moscow. In the focus of the fight is the Donetsk airport, where a renewed battle between separatist rebels and government forces has been underway for 3 days. The deputy defense minister of Donetsk said Tuesday that at least 5 people had died in 24 hours and another 26 wounded. So far, both sides have claimed to gain control of the airport, which now lies in ruins.
Враг начинает стягивать к городу и в окрестности города большое количество вооружений и живой силы.
In another incident, 14 people were injured in an explosion near the courthouse in Kharkiv, a city controlled by the government. Meanwhile, Ukrainian Prime Minister Arseniy Yatsenyuk attacked Russia, saying it is continuing to send military personnel and equipment to eastern Ukraine.
Means of radio intelligence are not being sold at the market in Donetsk, and they are not being sold in the Russian military shop. Only the Defense Ministry of the Russian Federation and the Head Intelligence Directorate of General Staff possess it.
Russian media reported a harsh denial, with the Russian Defense Ministry spokesman dismissing the allegations as nonsense and hallucinations. On Monday, Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko said his country is willing to sign a ceasefire with the rebels at any time. But as the death toll continues to rise and according to UN officials stands at around 4,700 people, a long-term ceasefire doesn't appear on the horizon.
And now to sports. With me as host of the I-24 News Sports Magazine, Jonathan Regev. Good evening, Jonathan.
Meredith.
So we begin with the Australian Open. Apparently it wasn't so surprising today as it was yesterday?
Yeah, not today. Yesterday, as you mentioned, big surprise. Ana Ivanovic, the 5th seed in the women's tournament, already ousted in the first round. A big surprise. Today, not so much. We take a look at the big shots. Novak Djokovic, world number 1, big favorite. He faced Alias Bedene from Slovenia. No worries for Nola, really easily cruising through, winning his match in straight sets. Djokovic won the event for 3 successive times, but 2014, last year, wasn't so good. Why? Because he lost to Stanislas Wawrinka in the quarterfinal. Wawrinka went on to win the title. What did the Swiss do this time? No problems for him against Marcel Ilhan from Turkey, also winner in 3 sets. Other big names, Leighton Hewitt is through. Serena Williams, world number 1 in the women's event, she's through. No major surprises today in the Australian Open.
And moving continents to a colder climate, we understand that champion skier Lindsey Vonn has a lot to celebrate.
Absolutely. Lindsey Vonn, she was out for a whole year from the skiing scene with injury. She came back in December, already won 3 events, and she now broke a record. She won last night in Italy her 63rd win in a World Cup event. She broke a 35-year-old record set by Anne-Marie Moser-Prol. I hope I'm saying the name correct. She set the record 35 years ago, 1980, from Austria, but now Lindsey Vonn won it. Tiger Woods' boyfriend, a lot of love there. He was in attendance in Italy to witness.
Missing tooth, right? What was the story behind that?
Yeah. I mean, you know,
Should we not really go there?
Yeah, you ski, you fall. It happens.
It happens.
But Tiger Woods was there. You know, it's a big appeal. Tiger Woods, Lindsey Vonn.
Well, I guess it's like riding a bike, shall we say? No,
Yeah.
just you're a champion. You're a champion. That's
Yeah,
it.
you don't forget that.
Yeah.
Absolutely, it's there.
Exactly. And finally, so we know that Lindsey Vonn, loves to ski, but how do cowboys fare on
We
this
think
slope?
of cowboys, we think of rodeo, right? Well, they love to ski every year, apparently. In Colorado, there's an event called the Downhill Cowboy Skiing. And what's the biggest event? The Stampede, of course. Quite easy to see why that is called the Stampede. Just all the cowboys get going. But it's nice. It's nice. A bit different than the rodeo scene, but hey, it's nice. And apparently a few of them know how to ski. Not only
apparently.
rodeo, yeah.
Not all of them wiped out. A few did, but I love their hats and their chaps as well.
Yeah, the move from Texas to Colorado, apparently it's working. They know their business on the sno. Some of them at least.
That's hysterical. I'm sure some of them enjoy beers before that event as well.
Absolutely.
Or whiskey in that case.
Whatever comes.
Thanks for these updates,
Thank you,
Jonathan. And moving back now to Israel, Orthodox women in Israel who have been in recent years become lawyers, journalists, and high-tech managers are now seeking to be elected to parliament within the Orthodox parties. Although major obstacles stand in their way, they believe they'll live to see the day when a Haredi woman will represent the entire Haredi public. I-24 News correspondent Jaffa Port brings us their voices.
Israel takes pride in being the only true democracy in the Middle East, especially these days as the country heads for elections. Yet in Israel of 2015, ultra-Orthodox women are still prohibited from being elected in their representative parties.
It is impossible, according to the regulations of the ultra-Orthodox Haredi parties, to even present such a candidacy as an option for the consideration of the voting entity, which is the Board of Rabbis.
It's an embarrassment for the democratic procedure that ultra-Orthodox are forbidden from being elected. They can just vote, but they can't be elected if they want.
But over the past couple of years, the winds of change are bringing hope to ultra-Orthodox women who wish to voice their agenda, as a new campaign calls on Haredi women to avoid voting to break the status quo.
Our message is short and clear: no voice, no vote. You don't let us influence. We will not vote. We'll stay at home. We'll be in the kitchen. We'll sew. We'll write something, but we will not go and vote.
These Haredi activists are no longer discreet. They face the conservative voices who state they have no place in the Israeli parliament.
The popular answer we get is no Haredi women want to be elected. And if there are such women, they aren't religious enough in their eyes. This, of course, is an answer that puts us in an impossible paradoxical situation, and we reject it. Yes, we are Haredi women, and yes, we aspire for a political representation in the Israeli parliament.
One of these brave women trying to be elected is 33-year-old Ruth Kolian, a mother of 4 and a law student.
Today there is a disciplining of ultra-Orthodox women by opinion leaders and political wheelers and dealers who are disconnected from modern times.
Meanwhile, Kolian and her colleagues appealed to court with a request to stop funding parties that discriminate against women.
The request had been rejected without even debating it, and of course we're appealing these days to the High Court of Justice.
Despite the obstacles and the sense of frustration, these Israeli ultra-Orthodox women truly believe they are making history day by day.
In 1948, the women of Israel received the right to vote for parliament. In 2015, ultra-Orthodox women will receive the prerogative to be elected in their own right.
And with me now for a look at the literary is a correspondent and author, Ayman Siksek. Ayman, thanks for being here.
Good evening,
so
Mary.
we have America's Bitter Pill. What is this about?
Well, it is a bitter pill coming from Stephen Burrell. He's, of course, the trailblazing article writer for Time magazine. He did a series of articles examining Obamacare. Its history, how it was written, and eventually how it was implemented. And much like other things in the Obama presidency, it's partly failure, partly success.
Right.
Well, Americans spent around $3 trillion on healthcare last year, just last year alone. That's more than any other developing nation in the world.
Oh.
So clearly, there's a problem here. And Obamacare, of course, wanted to address this. And what the book is about, it's showing us that what Obamacare achieved is making these services accessible to far more people, but through collecting more taxes. So really, the bottom line is that this draconic, really, really terrible, broken system is still being sustained. And the system was the problem in the first place.
Right, and the reality in the U.S. is kind of like, you survive if you can afford it, which is, it's pretty terrifying.
It is terrifying, and it's interesting that you say that because Stephen Brill himself, while writing this book, had to undergo open-heart surgery.
Yeah, I saw that. That was unreal. And it almost gives him a little more credibility when writing about this because he really went through the process.
Exactly, and he puts it in. So he becomes from the journalist just covering the story from outside to the person really in need of Medicare or Obamacare in this case. So it's a really complicated issue. And I think for me, what I got from this book reading about Obamacare is it's a modest success. It's a glory-free success. You can say that about Obama's presidency in general. I just read this article that said people expected his presidency to be transformative. Eventually, it looks like it's restorative. Instead of transforming this house that he got, the White House, it looks like he got a fixer-upper.
Okay, well, I think that's a right note to end on. And I just want to say, I think that'd make a really interesting documentary. So maybe we'll see this in film format one day. I'm Siksak. Thank you very much
Thank you,
for this. And we are going on a short break. Stay tuned for the Daily Debate.